Donald Trump had always been known for his bold, no-nonsense approach, but today felt different. A handwritten letter had arrived on his desk, sent by a small-town farmer named John Mitchell. The letter wasn't filled with formalities or pleasantries. It was direct, raw, and real. John wasn't asking for a favor. He was extending an invitation. He wanted the President of the United States to come see, firsthand, the struggles that small farmers like him were facing. And instead of tossing it aside like many would expect, Trump did something that stunned even his closest advisors. He said yes. As the massive presidential convoy rolled into the heart of rural America, the contrast couldn't have been starker. Gleaming black SUVs and armored limousines stood out against the backdrop of worn-out barns, dusty roads, and endless fields stretching beneath the golden sun. Secret Service agents moved swiftly, scanning every inch of the land with cautious, trained eyes. But John Mitchell? He wasn't intimidated. A proud third-generation farmer, he wiped his rough, calloused hands on his overalls and stepped forward with a firm handshake. "Mr. President, I appreciate you coming," John said, his voice steady. "But I'm not going to sugarcoat anything." Trump smirked, his signature confidence unwavering. "I wouldn't expect anything less." John nodded. "Good. Then let's get straight to it." He wasted no time, his frustration spilling out. "Sir, politicians talk big. They make promises. But out here, we're drowning. Prices keep dropping, fuel costs keep rising, and big corporations are squeezing us out. So tell me, are you here to listen, or just to talk?" Trump raised an eyebrow, the challenge in John's words not lost on him. "John, I respect farmers. But you've got to understand, change takes time." "Time?" John scoffed, shaking his head. "We don't have time, Mr. President. Our land is suffering. Families are breaking under debt. And while we're barely hanging on, massive corporations are buying up small farms like mine. So tell me, what's being done?" Trump crossed his arms. "I've done more for farmers than most presidents." John wasn't impressed. "Then why am I still struggling?" A tense silence settled between them. The air was thick. Secret Service agents exchanged uneasy glances, unsure if this conversation was about to spiral into something far more intense. Then, from the farmhouse porch, John's wife Lisa stepped forward, breaking the tension. "Gentlemen," she said with a calm but firm voice, "maybe this conversation would be better over a meal." Inside their modest kitchen, the reality of their struggles became even clearer. John gestured toward the fridge. "Mr. President, we grow food that feeds thousands. And yet, we can barely afford our own groceries." Trump frowned. "What's stopping you from succeeding?" John leaned in, his voice edged with frustration. "Big corporations. They buy up land, drive down prices, and leave small farmers like us with no way to compete." Trump tapped his fingers on the wooden table. "That's capitalism." John clenched his jaw.
"No, sir.
"There's a difference between competition and being crushed." Lisa set a plate of homemade cornbread in front of Trump. "Mr. President," she said gently, "you should taste what struggling America really feels like." Trump took a bite, chewing thoughtfully. It was good, simple, honest food. Lisa smiled sadly. "We sell this at the market, but we barely make enough to get by." John sighed, his voice lowering. "Farming isn't just a job, Mr. President. It's our life. It's our legacy. Our kids should inherit land, not debt." Trump nodded, his expression unreadable. "I hear you." John wasn't done. "But do you understand us?" For the first time, Trump looked around, not just at the people in the room but at the framed family photos, the worn furniture, the crack in the wall that had been patched up one too many times. This wasn't a boardroom. This wasn't a campaign rally. This was real America. And here, words weren't enough. John stood up. "Come with me. I want to show you something." Trump followed him outside. John held up his hands, scarred, cracked, stained with dirt. "These hands have worked this soil since I was a boy. My father's hands looked the same. And his before him."
Trump studied them.
"Hard work." John nodded. "But hard work alone isn't enough anymore." Trump exhaled. So, what do you want from me? John met his gaze. Not handouts. Not speeches. We need real change. Policies that don't just protect corporations but protect us, the backbone of this country. Trump was quiet for a moment before smirking. Ever driven a tractor? John chuckled. Not lately. John led him to his old John Deere. Hop in. Trump hesitated for a moment before climbing up. John handed him the controls. This, he said, is what feeds America. As Trump gripped the wheel and maneuvered the tractor forward, he realized it wasn't easy.
John leaned in.
See, Mr. President? This is more than business. This is personal. Trump nodded, a rare look of reflection crossing his face. I get it. John wasn't convinced. Do you? Trump looked out at the endless fields. Maybe not fully, but I'm starting to. As they walked back to the house, John wiped sweat from his brow. We aren't lazy. We aren't asking for favors. But banks treat us like risks while corporations get bailed out. Trump frowned. I believe in free markets. John shook his head. Markets should be fair, not rigged. Trump sighed. The system's complicated. Not to us, John shot back. It's simple. If we fail, America's food supply fails. Trump looked at the barn, the land, the sheer effort it took just to survive. For the first time, he wasn't just looking at numbers or policies. He was seeing people. Lisa walked over. Mr. President, would you like to stay for dinner? Trump blinked. Dinner? John smirked. We're blunt, but we're hospitable. Trump hesitated. His schedule was packed. His advisors would object. But he nodded. All right. Lisa smiled. Good. You'll see what real farm food tastes like. John chuckled. And hear more of my complaints. Trump laughed. I figured. As they sat down for dinner, John had no idea that this meeting would change everything. That night, something shifted. Maybe, just maybe, the president had really listened. And 2 weeks later, when John's phone rang and he heard Trump's voice on the other end saying, John, I didn't forget you, he realized maybe this time, something real was happening. And it all started with a simple letter.